Mrs. Gate at the Library of Whispers, and today I'm going to do a bit of reading from this book. It's actually a facsimile of Bulfinch's mythology, The Age of Chivalry, and it's an illustrated version. Now I can't quite remember when this was written originally. No, it's 19th century. I was looking for a date, but I can't actually find one in the book. But never mind, it's 19th century anyway. So this part is, it's actually part 3, The Knights of English History, and it is chapter 33, King Richard and the Third Crusade. So I thought we would read this together. So let's begin. The Crusades were the mightiest, or rather, the most ambitious undertaking of the chivalry of Europe. From the year 1096, for more than a century, the knights of all countries looked to the Holy Land as a field for winning their spurs and obtaining pardon of their sins. And it is most natural that in giving a picture of English chivalry, as it is shown in history, that we should give a description of King Richard's exploits in Palestine. In the last decade of the 12th century, Richard I of England took the cross which had come to him as a sort of legacy from his father and sailed for Antioch, which was being besieged by the Christians, to assist in the war in the Holy Land. At the same time, Philip Augustus of France and Frederick Barbarossa joined the Crusades. Frederick was drowned in a river of Cilicia, and his force had so dwindled that when they reached Antioch, hardly a tenth of the number were left that had started. Philip of France reached Antioch with his army, and there, as we shall learn later, he fought with the Turk and quarrelled with the Christian for a time, until he finally set sail for France without having accomplished the capture of the Holy City. As for Richard, he was not more successful, and although his deeds were so glorious as to cover him with honour, he was obliged to return home, leaving Jerusalem still in the hands of infidels. Now remember, this was written in the 19th century, so just remember the context of how it's been written. The exploits of King Richard. Now, as the ships were proceeding, some being before others, 2 of the 3 first, driven by the violence of the winds, were broken on the rocks. nation was warlike and accustomed to live by theft. They placed beams and planks at the entrance of the port, across the passage, the gates and entrances, and the whole land with one mind prepared themselves for a conflict with the English. God had so willed that the cursed people should receive the reward of their evil deeds by the hands of one who would not spare. promises to surrender, if only he might not be put in iron fetters. The king consents to the prayers of the supplicant, and caused silver shackles to be made for him. The prince of the pirates being thus taken, the king traversed the whole island, and took all its castles, and placed his constables in each, and constituted justiciaries and sheriffs, and the whole land was subjected to him in everything, just like England. The gold and the silks and the jewels from the treasuries that were broken open, he retained for himself. The silver and victuals he gave to the army. To the king of Jerusalem also he made a handsome present out of the booty. The king, proceeding thence, came to the siege of Acre, and was welcomed by the besiegers with as great a joy as if it had been Christ that had come again on earth to restore the kingdom of Israel. The king of the French had arrived at Acre first, and was very highly esteemed by the natives, but on Richard's arrival he became obscured, and without consideration, just as the moon is wont to relinquish her lustre at the rising of the sun. The king of the English, unused to delay, on the third day of his arrival at the siege, caused his wooden fortress, which he had called Mate Griffin, when it was made in Sicily, to be built and set up, and before the dawn of the fourth day, the machine stood erect by the walls of Acre, and from its height looked down upon the city lying beneath it. And there were thereon by sunrise archers casting missiles without intermission on the Turks and Thracians, engines also for casting stones, placed in convenient positions, battered the walls with frequent volleys. More important than these, the sappers, making themselves a way beneath the ground, undermined the foundations of the walls, while soldiers, bearing shields, having planted ladders, sought an entrance over the ramparts. The king himself was running up and down through the ranks, directing some, reproving some, and urging others, and thus was he everywhere present, and with every one of them, so that whatever they all did ought properly to be ascribed to him. The king of the French also did not lightly assail them, making as bold an assault as he could on the tower of the city, which is called Crusade. The renowned Caracrois and Mesticus, after Saladin, the most powerful princes of the heathen, had at that time the charge of the besieged city, who after a contest of many days promised by their interpreters the surrender of the city and a ransom for their heads, but the king of the English decided to subdue their obstinacy by force, and wished that the vanquished should pay their heads for the ransom of their bodies. But by the mediation of the king of the French, their life and indemnity of limbs only was accorded, if after the surrender of the city and yielding of everything they possessed, the Holy Cross should be given up. All the heathen warriors in Acre were chosen men, and were in numbers 9,000, many of whom, swallowing many gold coins, made a purse of their stomachs, because they foresaw that whatever they had of any value would be turned against them, if domesticus only, who on account of his nobility was spared, and declared openly, without any ceremony, that he would act in the same way towards Saladin himself. The king of the English then, having sent for the commanders of the French, proposed that in the first place they should conjointly attempt Jerusalem itself, but the dissuasion of the French discouraged the hearts of both parties, dispirited the troops, and restrained the king, thus destitute of men, from his intended march on that metropolis. The king, troubled at this, though not despairing, from that day forth, separated his army from the French, and directing his arms to the storming of castles along the seashore, he took every fortress that came his way, from Tyre to Ascalon, though after hard fighting and deep wounds. On the Saturday, the eve of the Nativity of the Blessed Virgin Mary, at earliest dawn, our men armed themselves with great care to receive the Turks, who were known to have preceded their march, and whose insolence nothing but a battle could check. The enemy had ranged themselves in order, drawing gradually nearer and nearer, and our men also took the utmost care to place themselves in as good order as possible. King Richard, who was most experienced in military affairs, arranged the army in squadrons, and directed who should march in front and who in the rear. He divided the army into 12 companies, and these again into 5 divisions, marshalled according as the men ranked in military discipline, and none could be found more warlike if they had only had confidence in God, who is the giver of all good things. On that day, the Templars formed the first rank, and after them came in due order the Bretons and men of Anjou. Then followed King Guy with the men of Pictou, and in the fourth line were the Normans and English, who had the care of the royal standard, and last of all marched the Hospitallers. This line was composed of chosen warriors, divided into companies. They kept together so closely that an apple, if thrown, would not have fallen to the ground without touching a man or a horse, and the army stretched from the army of Saracens to the seashore. There you might have seen their most appropriate distinctions, standards and ensigns of various forms, and hardy soldiers, fresh and full of spirits, and well fitted for war. Henry, Count of Champagne, kept guard on the mountain side, and maintained a constant lookout on the flank. The foot soldiers, bowmen, and arbalesters were on the outside, and the rear of the army was closed by the post horses and wagons, which carried provisions and other things, and journeyed along between the army and the sea to avoid an attack from the enemy. This was the order of the army as it advanced, gradually, to prevent separation, for the less close the line of battle, the less effective was it for resistance. King Richard and the Duke of Burgundy, with a chosen retinue of warriors, rode up and down, narrowly watching the position and manner of the Turks, to correct anything in their own troops, if they saw occasion, for they had need producing a horrible noise and clamour. The earth vibrated from the loud and discordant sounds, so that the crash of thunder could not be heard amidst the tumultuous noise of horns and trumpets. They did this to excite their spirit and courage, for the more violent their clamour became, the more bold were they for the fray. Thus the impious Turks threatened us both on the side towards the sea and from the side of the land, and for the space of 2 miles not so much earth as could be taken up in one hand could be seen. On account of the hostile Turks who covered it, oh, how obstinately they pressed on and continued their stubborn attacks, so that our men suffered severe loss of their horses, which were killed by their darts and arrows. The enemy came rushing down like a torrent to the attack, and many of our balusters